All right, let's talk some autos now. GM shares down more than 2%, about 30 minutes before the close. The company announcing today that 5,000 white-collar workers participated in GM's voluntary buyout program. GM now in position to avoid layoffs, a spokesperson saying in an official statement, quote, given the results of the program, company-wide and voluntary separations are not a consideration at this point. Joining us now to weigh in on this is David Whiston, Morningstar Equity Strategist for U.S. Autos. David, good to see you. So are further cuts coming to GM, or is that it?
Well, in autos, I guess you never know, but I think as long as the economy doesn't completely fall off a cliff, and that's probably a whole other segment to discuss with an economist, but I think most of the cost cuts going forward, remember they did talk about at their last earnings call $2 billion in cost reductions by the end of 2024, so over the next 2 years, and they're getting $1 billion of it from headcount, but the numbers confirmed today. So the rest of it's probably coming from other places of overhead, and in particular reducing vehicle complexity, reducing materials build as much as you can, anything to make the company more efficient, because they've got to compete against not only Tesla, but they've also probably got some cost increases coming with the UAW contract negotiations this summer.
Well, David, let's talk a little bit more about Tesla and how GM stacks up, because with its most recent sales numbers, it now has overtaken Ford as the number 2 seller of EVs behind Tesla. How much ground how much progress has GM made, and how much more ground do you expect them to cover, narrowing that margin here with Tesla?
Yeah, I think people, the general public, when they think of GM EVs, they probably just think of the Bolt. And for a long time that was true, but they weren't really paying attention to all the other product announcements that have been coming out. And we're just about finally at the point where these are going from announcements to actual vehicles you can buy. The Cadillac Lyriq crossover, for example, is already out, but this fall, first of the spring, you've got the Silverado BEV going to commercial customers this year, and then that expands across to the retail channel over the next 12 months. And then in the fall, you've got the Blazer, and then the Equinox BEV, I think, is a really interesting test, because that's going to be priced starting at around $30,000. And that's really the first attempt at a true mass market EV that has good range and actually has features you'd want to buy. Previously, for more, quote, affordable BEVs were these Econo boxes that got you 80 to 100 miles on a charge, and that just wasn't good enough. And that opened the door really nicely for Tesla. But Tesla now has much more competition, not only from GM with the truck and the crossovers and the Sierra BEV 2 coming. You've got the Cadillac Celestiq at the very high end, a $300,000 Cadillac. It's a really interesting experiment they're doing there. But also across, look at what the Germans are doing, and Ford with the Mustang Mach-E and their F-150 Lightning. There's a lot of choices now in the EV space.
Yeah, let's dial in a little bit more on Ford. I'd say majority of the press in that space has gone to Ford because of the success of the Ford F-150 Lightning, but them slipping below GM in terms of U.S. EV sales. What's your reaction? How surprised were you by that development?
Well, to be fair, the Mach-E's been out over a year, and then with Lightning, they did have a battery issue. I read in the papers that there was a fire that it didn't lead to a mass recall, but there was a fire from what I read in some media reports. So they had to stop production in Dearborn on the Lightning for at least 5 weeks, and that just got resumed very late in the quarter to full production. So that between that and the Bolt coming back from the recalls on that old generation battery technology, and it's not the Ultium technology that's in all the other GM EVs. It opened the door a bit for GM to get some volume, but ultimately it's going to be about profitability. And when you compare GM and Ford right now, GM's comfortably ahead of Ford in the profitability department.
David, when we talk about widespread EV adoption, obviously there's certainly a number of hurdles. You mentioned the fact that we need a lower priced EV, and we need many of those models in order to increase that widespread adoption. What do you think a realistic time frame looks like for this? 2030, is that realistic?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, because the state of California and the 17, 18 other states that are following California have decided that you will only be able to buy a zero-emission vehicle in 2035, and I think the ratio is 68% by 2030. The Equinox I mentioned earlier is the first, to your question, that's really the first test of, can EVs have major mass market appeal at that price point? and not be branded a Tesla. Tesla really, they had an opportunity here, I think, to really put a stranglehold on the market, and it looks like they're going to miss that window, although there's plenty of time to go. But you need a lot more product out, and we need to get EVs to be for everybody, not just for the wealthy.
If, in fact, gas prices continue to climb off of that OPEC production cut, do you think that can be a catalyst for EV sales moving forward? Or was it the last time we were sitting at $4+ a gallon?
Yeah, I mean, I think a true panic point might be something maybe north of $5 or even $6 a gallon. So we've got a ways to go still, but the momentum is there and the regulations in place to really force it on consumers who don't want it. It's going to be interesting by the end of the decade how many Americans are going to just go ahead and buy an EV even if they don't want to, because they may not have that much of a choice. And look at the Buick and Cadillac brands, for example. They'll be all electric by the end of this decade. So it's kind of that battle of, will the market accept what versus the regulation? And of course, policymakers want to do this for environmental reasons, understandably. But we need more choice. We need more product. We need more infrastructure. That's one thing that was in President Biden's infrastructure bill. And now we've got the IRA tax credit, which we'll find out on April 18th for sure what vehicles are truly eligible for either all of it or at least half of it. But until you get more lithium processing out of China, I don't see too many vehicles getting the $7,500. Though GM says that at least some of theirs will be this year.
Indeed. All right, got to leave it there. Morningstar David Whiston, good to see you, sir. Thanks so much.